Hey, all you beautiful people, how are you? You know, it's been so long since I did a podcast episode, I almost don't know where to start. Just kidding. Go. Hey, welcome to the I Am Podcast, where we answer all the questions about spirituality and inner peace you ever wanted to ask. I'm your host, Sean Webb. Okay, so I apologize for the big delay in getting the podcast restarted for 2015. In late 2014, I had a number of things that were pulling me in different directions that demanded my attention, and I just had to take a little bit of a break to work on that stuff and to focus on that stuff before relaunching into the podcast in 2015. There's a book coming very soon that is going to blow the doors off, explaining spirituality and the path to Nirvana, which is going to be awesome. And it's going to be brand new content. It's not going to be a rehash of 2,500-year-old content in a different way. It's going to be brand new content that is actually allowing people to awaken, not necessarily at will. I mean, things kind of have to align for that kind of stuff to occur, and it's a physiological process, so your body has to be ready, etc. But the good news is it's brand new stuff, and it's going to be additive to the world of spirituality and explaining awakening and allowing people to get deeper into that process of awakening. So that's exciting. We have an app coming, which the funding for is now complete. And so there's going to be a huge, awesome emotional intelligence and spirituality app that includes a portion for meditation and explaining the cognitive process of our pain and suffering and how it's occurring. And so millions of people will have access to that via their mobile devices, which is awesome. Very excited about that. And another thing that happened over the holidays, a little bit of sad news, my mom passed away. After a lengthy battle with old age. I'm actually joyful about the whole situation because she was older. She was 91. She'd lived a full life. She had filled that with children and personal interests, and was at a holiday party with some of my family where she lived in Atlanta, and was having a good time, rolling herself around in the wheelchair, which she wasn't used to because she'd been walking up until recently, and just kind of crashed at the party. And so they took her back to the hospice place that was taking care of her more actively. And about 11:30 at night, she checked out and took off and left. And, you know, we'll see her soon, of course, but within a blink of an eye as far as the cosmos is concerned. But it was an awesome way to go. And I really, I love my mom dearly and a big part of my life, but, didn't really have the tears thing. It was more of a, wow, a joy, kind of an exhalation of, wow, that's a really good way that she left us. And she had a great life, and there's really no reason to be sad because, she's now in a more awesome place than we are, and the only reason to feel sad about someone passing away, at least in an expected way, a sudden loss can be quite jarring, but an expected loss, you can move right into acceptance. You can move immediately all the way through the 5 stages of grief within a couple of seconds and go right into acceptance. And so that's an amazing place to be. And so that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Not death in general, but the use of what we're talking about here, the use of the Body, Mind, Spirit 101 and the things that we learn about the cause of our pain and suffering. There's a process of using that on a day-to-day basis that allows us to get into a space of awakening. And in general, meditation and the other wisdom disciplines of, yesteryear, they all focus on, meditating, seeking within, getting into that space where they can learn about, or where we can learn about, how things work within us kind of at a subconscious level. We can get into our mind and watch our mind and realize that we're not our mind, and that creates a separation there of the awareness, the observer, the meta-awareness, in separating from the mind's machinations and the awareness, etc., that allows us to step onto the path of, oh, well, my body is not me. I have a body, but it's really not me. I'm observing the body. And then we go into the next space of, well, my emotions and reactions aren't me. I have emotions and reactions, but they're not really me because I can observe them from a distance. And then we go even further into I am not mind. I have a mind, I can watch a mind, but from the existence of the observer, there's a separation there. And so getting into that meditation process, getting into that introspective space allows us to come to those realizations naturally, slowly at times, sometimes over several years. But what we're talking about doing here with this podcast and the stuff that we've talked about in the last, I don't know how many years now that we've been doing this, is understanding from a cognitive perspective exactly the moving parts and the variables that come together to create our pain and suffering in our mind. Because the really neat thing about that is that no one's ever done that before. No one's ever explained exactly how emotions work from A to Z in the mind so that you can look at them. Now, the interesting thing about that is that when practicing that discipline of looking at the variables that cause our pain and suffering, including the ego and our attachments of self, our sense of self, right? The things that we compare the world's events to that create our emotions and yada, yada, yada. At the point that we start to make that process unconscious to where it becomes kind of just a habit that, oh, well, that could have been a trigger for me had I not been more in control of this process, right? Something bad in the world happens and it comes in through our senses and we understand that, oh, well, that may be addressing this attachment that I have of my sense of self. And so that's why I might be feeling angry. When we know that thanks to some studies that have been done, Matt Lieberman, 2007, UCLA, if we put a cognitive process to our emotional process, the emotion immediately downregulates. And so the suffering stops. The emotion can exist for a few moments, but then because we're doing that automated analysis of what's going on, kind of that witnessing of the mess in our minds going on, immediately, physiologically, the emotion gets downregulated, and so our suffering can cease. And over time, that builds up with plasticity and whatnot to where we can gain a position where, those limbic reactions can occur, but they don't ruin our day anymore because we're immediately able to take control of them, downregulate them, almost shut them down to a point. And the whole process of looking at this stuff and seeing how our mind works, that creates that same exact space that, everybody's been teaching for the last 3,000 years. Right, the Buddha and Jesus meditating and Muhammad talking about 1 hour of contemplation is better than 1,000 years of worship. Right, this is the type of thing that we're talking about. That introspection that allows us to create that distance between ourselves and our ego, or ourselves and that mind process. The ability to observe that mind and understand that mind isn't us. Well, that's what all this stuff that we're doing in this podcast allows us to do from a very practical perspective. It's one thing to be able to sit in meditation, and you definitely should be sitting in meditation every day if possible, because there are a lot of health benefits to it. There are a lot of physiological benefits to it. There are a lot of benefits that calm the mind. But at the same time, when we employ this second tier of understanding of exactly how the process works in the mind, what we're doing is we're creating that separation of awareness and the mess that's going on. And so at that point, we can see that we aren't the mess of the mind. And that creates that magical space that allows us to deepen our spiritual discovery, to deepen our spiritual awareness. And so that's what I think is really neat about the stuff that we're doing here in this podcast, because one, it's brand new, and kind of it was you want to say given to me by the universe or given to me by God to give to you guys, fine, that's great. But you guys can experience it firsthand. So it's not like I'm special or anything. We're just getting you to the point of being able to do it too. We can offer this new information, this new process that creates an addition. It's not like an either or. It's an addition to the other practices that we've been taught by the Buddha and by Jesus and by Lao Tzu and by Muhammad and all the people that came before us, Krishna and a lot of the visionaries, Gandhi, the Dalai Lama, all these folks that have come before us to teach us how to deepen our practice by looking within. Well, this from a very practical perspective is looking in with a microscope and creating that space of separation between our awareness and the mess that's going on. And so we can understand that we're not the mess that's going on, and we can have input on the mess that's going on in our mind so that there is no longer any mess to deal with in the future. And so what we're really talking about is the practical path to Nirvana. And that's kind of what allows me to be in the space of losing my mom and just being joyful. Not that, in that weird way where, yay, mom's dead, she was a horrible person. No, she's a great person. Everybody loved her. I loved her. But there's a place that you can get to in your mind that allows you not to have to deal with the bullshit. And not to have to deal with the suffering. And it's not like you're suppressing the emotions that later will build up and boil over and explode, and all of a sudden you have to have this release. They're gone. They're down-regulated to the point of not ruining your day anymore. And they get processed like subconsciously through a process that no longer affects your awareness, your meta-awareness of the awareness of what you're paying attention to. And so it's an amazing space. And it's basically kind of a never-ending bliss. And what I want for this podcast, and what I want for this book, what I want for this application that we're putting out, what I want for every project that I'm doing moving forward for the rest of my entire life, is to reduce your pain and suffering and help you get the tools so that you can get to that point of a never-ending bliss. As I knock things over on my desks. Sorry about that. And at that point, you then become your own savior. You then become your own connection and direct communion with God, the universe, infinite intelligence, whatever words you want to use to describe the thing that is beyond our mind, beyond our body. And so that's what we're doing here. And so I just wanted to, restate what our purpose is here and why we're doing this, because I do care deeply about you. Even though you think I don't know you, I know you at the deeper level. I know you at the level beyond your mind, at the level beyond your body. I don't really care about the mess of the mind and the mess of the body. I really care about the spirit within and the portion of our existence that goes beyond both mind and body that we kind of share as this awesome, infinite field of intelligence, love, bliss, awesomeness, etc., that permeates every bit of us. And I want you to be able to tune into that better. And so what I'm trying to do here is provide the tools to help us do that collectively. Because as we change ourselves, we change the world. And that's no joke. Because if we all collectively decided to change something tomorrow, like we got everybody on board, 7 billion people in the world, and we all decided we're going to change green lights to red lights and red lights to green lights, we could change the reality and how people work in this world moving forward from here on out. And so we can do that with anything. We can do that with war. We can do that with pain and suffering. We can do that with starvation and hunger. We can do that with poverty. We can do that with whatever if we get enough people on board to make the changes. And so even one person, making the transition from asshole land to humanist and person who's not persecuted from within, all of a sudden that changes the whole world by just a little bit. But more and more people that get on board and we're able to make that change and make that transition, all of a sudden we're making the world a better place, little by little. And over time, there becomes a tipping point that we become the force that changes everything moving forward. And how many millions of lives are we going to touch? Talking about the people who are unborn at this point. How many millions of lives are we going to touch and make better? Because we were able to improve ourselves, improve our environment, improve our world. That's what this is about. So I'm sorry for the mini rant. I do miss you guys, and I do apologize for taking such a long break. And yes, I really appreciate the emails and letters and things that you've sent in to say, hey, where are you? Miss you. We're coming back with a fervor in 2015. I'm going to try to get these podcasts out for the next few weeks while I finish this book. That might be a challenge, but I just wanted to give you a message to say, hey, I hope you had a great holiday. I missed you guys. Happy New Year. We're going to hit it hard in 2015. I hope things are well. Talk to you soon. Peace.